Unlike a custom, a habit does not imply the act has been adopted, so not everyone actually performs the act. A group's material culture consists of a collection of their social customs. Example, jeans typically represent the American material culture. Culture originates at a hearth, a center of innovation. Folk is anonymous hearths from anonymous sources at unknown dates. On the other hand, popular culture is traceable to a specific person or corporation. Compared to popular culture, folk culture is transmitted from one location to another more slowly and on a smaller scale. In the northern region, Buddhists paint divine figures. In the southern region, Hindus create scenes of everyday life. In the western portion, Muslims show religious beautiful flowers and plants. Music may have started in China in 2697 BC according to Chinese legend. Most folk songs may tell a story or convey information about life cycle events, which is in contrast to popular music which is written on the purpose of being sold. Soccer is one of the world's most popular sports and as with other folk customs, soccer's origin is obscure. The transformation of soccer from English folk custom to global popular culture began in 1800. The fusion of soccer started in the Netherlands, where Dutch students returning from the UK were the first to play soccer in Europe.
This is key issue 2 of chapter 4 done by Jared and Paul. This key issue covers material culture, which branches out to clothing, food, and housing. Starting with clothes, preferences in full clothing change mainly from agricultural and climate conditions. Then there are traditional clothing from all over the world, like the poncho and dashiki. However, it is controversial to wear full clothing in popular cultures and vice versa. Next is clothing in popular cultures. Your clothes can indicate your occupation and income. Also, the increase in communication leads to faster diffusion of clothing. This means that fashion trends are always changing, which produces great profits for the fashion industry. Now we are on to food. The food eaten in folk cultures is strongly influenced by the environment. For example, in Istanbul, Turkey, there are 1,000 bostands that feed the city with fresh produce for centuries. Also, the natural properties of certain foods may lead to them being eaten more. On the other hand, taboos are a social restriction of eating a certain food. Taboos are created when food is associated with something negative, or if we could harm the environment when eating it. The most popular taboos come from the Bible, such as pig and oxen. Finally, food in popular culture is influenced more by culture than the environment, but there are many regional variations. Around the world, Coca-Cola and Pepsi differ in popularity by many countries. However, the change in taste is barely noticeable. Also, in the US, Texans may prefer tortilla chips because of the major Hispanic presence there.
The environment affects food in many ways. A great example of this is wine production. With it comes this factor known as terroir and is the reason why wine and other food vary in taste throughout different locations. Vineyards are where grapes are grown for wine production and take into consideration factors such as climate, topography, and soil due to their effects on a wine's quality. These qualities would include things such as acidity, aroma, and level of alcohol. Folk housing is heavily influenced by factors such as climate, location, and religion. Examples of this would include pitched roofs in snowy or rainy climates to allow for runoff, and smaller windows in hot or dry climates in order to lessen the amount of unnecessary light from entering the house. Religious homes may believe that certain walls or corners in their homes are sacred, and so would reserve it for their specific reason, such as how houses in Madagascar have their main door facing westward, as they believe it's the most important direction. When constructing a house, the most common materials used were wood and brick. However, materials such as stone, grass, sod, and skins may all be used depending on the surrounding environment. Once again reinforcing the idea of why folk housing varies from place to place more than popular housing. Homes built in popular culture are usually built by companies who mass produce the houses and sell them for profit, not typically built by the homeowner. The style of the house is also affected by the surrounding environment, but by a more or so different way, in which it's based on the current popular trend or fashion. These factors combined leads to popular housing not varying as much from area to area, unlike how folk housing does.
This is Key Issue 3 by JP and Robert. Why is access to folk and popular culture unequal? Popular culture diffuses rapidly around the world primarily through electronic media. The latest fashions in material culture and leisure activities can be viewed by anyone in the world who has access to one or more forms of electronic media. The principal obstacle to popular culture is lack of access to electronic media. Access is limited primarily by lack of income, lack of electricity, and cell phone service. The world's most important electronic media format by far is TV. Watching TV is the most popular leisure activity in the world. The average human watched 3.1 hours of TV per day in 2009, and the average American watched 4.6 hours. Diffusion of TV. Television technology was developed in the UK, France, Germany, Japan, the Soviet Union, and the US during the early 20th century. In the mid-20th century, the US had 86% of the world's 37 million TV sets. TV diffused to Europe during the late 20th century. Ownership rates climbed sharply in many developing countries during the early 21st century. Diffusion of the Internet. The diffusion of the Internet service follows the pattern established by television, but at a more rapid pace. In 1995, there were 40 million Internet users worldwide, including 25 million in the US. Between 1995 and 2000, the worldwide increase grew from 40 million Internet users to 361 million. Between 2000 and 2011, Internet usage continued to increase rapidly in the US to 77% of the population.
For the diffusion of social media in the 21st century, people in the US have dominated the use of social media like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Facebook was created in 2004 by Harvard students, and it has diffused to other countries. In 2008, the US had 1/3 of all Facebook users. In 2011, it dropped down to 1/5. During 2011, most of Twitter's users came from the US, being 1/3 of all users. Another 1/3 originated in 6 other countries: India, Japan, UK, Germany, Brazil, and Canada. And the second most amount of users actually came from India, who were very, very, very poor. For YouTube, the US accounted for 30% of worldwide users in 2011, and 17 other countries, mostly in Europe, accounted for the remainder, and most countries didn't have YouTube in 2011. A challenge in accessing electronic media is that the media is controlled by developed countries like Japan, the UK, and the US. The news only reflect on Western values, cover only Western concerns, and developing countries cannot compete with funding of major networks. To cope with these threats, some countries have attempted to limit or block TV, restrict internet use on certain sites, and ban social media.
In many African and Asian countries, clothing businesses have had to adapt due to pop culture affecting their clothes. To adapt, they have blended folk and pop culture into their clothes. An example of this is blending anime into Supreme hoodies, such as this one. Many LDCs view TV as a way to spread economic and cultural imperialism. It is more common than not that in LDCs, the media and the news is biased due to the fact that the government controls it. An example of this is Kim Jong-un spreading propaganda and saying his dad invented the hamburger. One source that is both reliable and unbiased is BBC World Service. Some Asian and African countries feel negatively about the Western concept of press due to the fact that they think that the American news organization reflects its own values and shows inaccurate points.
Here are some negative impacts of pop culture on Indian women. One negative impact is a higher demand for dowries, or gifts from one family to another as a sign of respect. Dowries can be cars, electronics, or even just household appliances. These are traditionally offered at weddings, usually by the groom, but more recently it is expected that the bride offers instead. The Indian government has tried to ban these gifts because of how they can affect the bride. For example, if the bride's family cannot create a good enough dowry, the groom's family can cast her out to the streets, or even her own family could refuse to take her back. Another negative impact of pop culture on Indian women is the increase in prostitution. This is when women travel around getting paid by men to have sex. This increase in prostitution has women from developing countries serve men from developed countries. Women also go on sex tours, primarily in Japan, Norway, Germany, and the Netherlands. Prostitution has created the idea that women can be bought. Switching topics, here are some natural effects of pop culture. One effect is the increased demand for natural resources. This includes animal products and raw minerals. There is an increased demand for animal products because it becomes increasingly hard to find certain animals due to them being endangered. These animals are endangered because they are constantly hunted for their skin or body parts. Another natural effect of pop culture is the cause of people recycling more and more. People are forced to recycle because they have stopped using biodegradable products and started using plastic. Moving on, pop culture affects the environment too. For example, golf courses use upwards of 200 acres of land for each course, and with hundreds of courses in the US alone, this proves pop culture can majorly affect the environment. The highest concentration of US golf courses are located in the north central states, plus Vermont and Maine. The lowest concentration of the United States golf courses are in Southern California and the Mid-Atlantic region. There is a major gap of concentration of courses between these places, implying that they are not evenly distributed among the US. This shows how pop culture may not spread to certain places equally. When pop culture does spread evenly to different places, it is called a uniform landscape. An example of this is fast food restaurants, such as McDonald's. Major franchises like this can be recognized around the world, therefore creating a larger consumption of their product.